So today I want to talk about thumbnails. Thumbnails are one of the most important tools in drawing and even in painting. You will find them in all sorts of drawing books and most often talked about when we're working on composition. So, about thumbnails. So thumbnails are the small little drawings. They're called thumbnails because they're small. They're not actually this small, although I have seen some artists do that. You need to work a little bigger than that in order to solve the problems that we want to solve on a small scale before we go to our big drawings. So most often thumbnails are basically design practice for the big drawing, because once you get to that big piece of paper, it's going to be very challenging to make corrections, right? You'd be doing corrections on a very large scale, sometimes having to start completely over if you skip this step. So thumbnail sketches allow you to plan what the finished drawing is going to look like. You're going to examine the different placement of lights and darks, so value, and the arrangement of the objects, the positive, negative space. There's a lot to consider. So you'll find thumbnails in a lot of drawing instructional books, and there's some examples right there of compositional choices in relation to value. So they're looking at where to place the values. And in my little lesson on 6 rules of composition, I do talk about the rule of thirds, which is what you see here, which they're using to place that tree. One thing that I didn't mention in my 6 rules of composition video is the word tangent. So I said a lot, hey, this looks more pleasing, etc., etc. But what we want to consider is how our eye moves around the image. And a tangent, just like when one goes off, oh, rabbit, let me tell you about hares. You know a verbal tangent, how it kind of leads you astray off of the topic. Visual tangents mean the same thing. So when I say tangent, it's your eye being led somewhere unintentionally in the image. So, for example, look at these 2 thumbnails of this building and that tree. And in the top one, you can see that tree is lined up exactly right in front of that line, that edge of that building. And so they're just touching, or they're overlapping in an awkward way, creating a tangent. So our eye might get stuck there, or unconsciously we might find this awkward and we might get stuck there. We might wonder how big this building is, or does it end there? Is this the side of the building? What am I missing? You can see how that was resolved by just moving the tree over. It is your job to adapt your compositions to work. So you might have to lie or take artistic license. That's a thing. Take artistic license when you're looking at your still life or your subject and adapt it. Edit out hydro. I said hydro. I'm from Canada, where our power is often water power, hydropower. Take out your power lines, take out your garbage can, or even edit out a tree or a car from a scene that you're doing outside. Make it work for your drawing. So this is something that you need to sort out on a small scale before you go and do a bigger final drawing. They can even be used in an abstract manner. So I do a lot of abstracted paintings, and so this is basically a thumbnail. I might choose to blow one of those up sometime, but I know which one will work based on having done it on a small scale. Also, even if I do an abstract painting that doesn't copy one of those thumbnails, when I'm working small like that, I am solving a lot of problems one after another, so that when I am finally working large, maybe I use less paint, or maybe I use less time, or maybe I just am able to work at a pace that suits my creative development, and I'm not being caught or hung up on these compositional problems because I've had a lot of practice in the sketchbook. And here's another sketchbook of mine. You can see the thumbnail here wasn't to work out different compositions, it was to work out the values. So I did a gray scale thumbnail. There's a couple more as I figure out, I want to do a bigger study, but let's first decide, this is deciding what subject matter to include. There's some more value ones. I know I do a lot of landscape, but you can see that the success, I just hit myself in the face with my sketchbook. The success of your larger work often relies on you practicing on a smaller scale. So use your sketchbooks. Use your sketchbooks and problem solve in your sketchbooks. Figure things out before you go big. Some of these, they weren't done for the purpose of going larger. They were just done for the purpose of studying in itself. So, yes, I redid some of them, like they became a colored sketch, but that wasn't the goal of all of them, right? Okay. I hope that explains thumbnails for you. They have a purpose to plan for your bigger drawings, and they also have a purpose for just helping you solve problems on a small scale. They're fun, they're fast, and you can focus on different things for your thumbnails. So for several thumbnails, a series of 3 or 4, just focus on the placement of objects, work on overlap, work on scale, and foreground, middle ground, background, leading the eye through your composition, so placement of the objects. Then for a couple, maybe 2 or 3 more thumbnails, work on just positive, negative space. Color in all of the negative space, all the space around the subject, and do that for several thumbnails. Maybe color in the subject in one of them and leave the negative space empty. And then for a couple of thumbnails, work on value. Where are the darks and lights in the composition? Value is one of your most powerful tools in drawing. So take some time in the thumbnail stage and block in the value and see how that changes the composition. Because I guarantee you, you might have a balanced composition or something that you think is really working. And then you add in your lights and darks and it will change the dynamic. It will change the balance of your drawing. So value is incredibly important. Practice value in your thumbnails. Sometimes I do that by shading the full value scale. Sometimes I do that by just numbering, so putting in numbers. Sometimes value can be worked out by shading in the actual full 5 values, or especially if you're on a time crunch, you can number, you can draw your thumbnails. There's the value scale 1 through 5, and then you can number the areas. And that forces you, it's not like a shortcut. In time it can be, but it's just as hard as shading in the value, or if not harder, because you're having to make choices about, like, really look, is that a value 4? Is that a value 3? Where in the vase does the value 3 change to value 4? So it makes you think in a different way, and it is actually quite challenging to do those little numbered value thumbnails. Pencils here. So I'm going to grab 2H, which is the lightest. The other ones we have are HB, which is in the middle, and 2B, which is softer and darker. And the whole point of these is to study composition on a small, sort of easy scale. I wonder if I can do 4 in a row or just 3. I didn't really plan this out very well. It just depends. If I was going to do 4 in a row, but that's kind of crowding me on that side. We just need 16. So I'm just making rectangles, and I'm making them all the same size. But we don't have to have a landscape orientation We can have like a portrait orientation as well, and that would still be the same dimensions. We're not going to work with square composition yet. We're going to work with a rectangle. It's more straightforward, and you can always apply what we learn to a square composition at a later time, or an even longer rectangle. Okay, I'm just going to keep going with a lot of horizontal ones. This is assuming that my final drawing I'm kind of interested in doing a horizontal application. And then I'm going to do a couple of verticals at the bottom here. I might have made that a bit longer than my other ones. It's kind of, I'm just eyeballing it. I expect you to do the same. Just make sure they're not crazy, like one's a square, one's incredibly long. We want to practice altering the composition within the same sort of parameters. Okay, going to keep going and just start laying them out. So I have to set my timer to 3 to 4 minutes, but my phone is recording, so I'm going to use an online timer. Look at me being resourceful here. Let's give this a shot. So we want 3 to 4 minutes per sketch. I'm going to start with 3 just to give myself a challenge. And I've got my bits just arranged over here to the side. And starting the timer. All right, I'm gonna put the bottle in first because it's my largest item. And then I'm worrying about the shape of it a bit later, okay? I've got an apple here, and it's sitting on top of a tin. And I've got a bowl in front. And this little, oops. Makeup bottle. And those are my 5 objects. I've got 2 minutes left. So I've clumped them together, and now I'm going to maybe pull in a darker pencil, especially so you can see a little better for your benefit. I'm gonna just go for the HB 1 step darker, and I'm gonna start I've got 1 minute and 40 seconds left. I'm kind of watching the timer just to see if I need to make adjustments for the next drawing. And it's okay if you don't get things right at first. This is just to plan the arrangement of our objects. And the idea is after this assignment, I will have many compositions that I've landed on that I think are the strongest. And I'm gonna call that one done. But I still have a minute on the timer, so I shall explain some composition ideas to you. Here we have a range of heights, right? Plato said, find and represent the variety within the unity. And that was his explanation of what is a good composition in art. And so I've got a variety of heights here. Look, I have the water bottle up here. I've got apple, makeup bottle, and bowl. So lots of different heights there. And I've got varying edges here on the bottom, like where this object ends. So they're spaced out in space like that. So that's a bit of a variety. What else? I have some overlap going on. And in terms of whether or not it's a good composition within the confines of this rectangle, I would lean on maybe not amazing because of all this negative space here. Do you see this? With nothing in it, that is negative space. And even if I added the edge of a table, there's my timer. Even if I add the edge of the table in here or something like that, that kind of helps it a little bit, but there's still an awful lot of negative space around it. One of our first rules of composition is the rule of thirds. So if I'm going to block in the thirds, like break this little thumbnail into thirds, then I wonder if I should do that in a different color for you. So if I divide this into thirds, this way into 3, and then also from top to bottom into 3, we're left with hot spots. And that's where you might want to place your main objects and focal points for interest and balance. So rather than do what I did here and put it all in the center, let's try to move things onto these areas right here. These 4 hot spots are places where you might want to put something. So this item is well placed right here. And I feel like this water bottle should just maybe move over. So I'm setting the timer again. This exercise doesn't mean you have to not take breaks in between your thumbnails. It just means you're only giving yourself 3 to 4 minutes per thumbnail. So I've chatted my way through this little break here, and I'm going to go back to my 2H pencil and rock on in my second composition. I'm not even going to change the thingies in my view here, other than maybe move them farther apart. Let's try that. Timer is starting now. All right. So water bottle again, but this time before I even go into it, I am going to mark my rule of thirds here. And I'm going to place the water bottle right here over 2 of these thingies. Lines. I keep saying thingies. My apologies. Vocabulary. Here's my little bowl. It's a very awkward shape, and I'm looking down at it, so I don't really think I've gotten it successfully yet, but that's okay. Putting my apple in another hot spot here, over top of the little tin. And then right in front of the tin, really looking down at these objects because I'm fairly tall and the table's right here in front of me. So there we go. I've already made a mistake I want to clear. I would not recommend using an eraser during these, just because it slows you down, and we're not trying to be precious with it, right? We're trying to just block in our shapes. All right, I've got 1:52 on the timer, so I'm going to just kind of lay in these shapes a bit better. Oh, I'll switch to my 2H, that'll help. There we go. And already I feel more comfortable with this composition. It feels more spacious. There's places for your eyes to rest. Look at this negative space. It's a lot more interesting than just the circle around your objects, right? All right, 50 seconds on the timer. And I'm looking at this is touching the bottom, which isn't a great idea. So I'm gonna draw attention to that no. It creates a tension and awkwardness in the composition. So when that's just touching the edge, maybe if it's cut off a little, it won't be as, as awkward, but you don't necessarily want to cut off the base of your drawing, right? So for this one, I'm just going to leave it in and use it as a teachable moment here. 3 minutes is a long time. It won't feel like that when you're first starting out, but it will get better as you go. There's my timer. You can see I've lined up my things in, I didn't say thingies, notice. Lined up my objects using the rule of thirds, and paid attention to negative space. So I'm pretty happy about that. It's much better than this already. Yay. Moving on. Not going to think about it too much, except that I would like to fix this situation. I found another one. This object is just touching this object. That was our third rule: scale, variety, overlap. So nothing just touching. So these aren't overlapping, they're just touching. These objects are overlapping and have a much better relationship. Same with these, although boom, 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 they're all in a line, and this one's touching the edge. So I'm going to find a red pen so that I can mark a couple of maybe no-nos happening. cat, can you go fetch me a red pen? So here's one spot that I'm kind of concerned about, and here's the other. These parts just touching right there. Everything else I'm excited about. Without spending too much time chattering, I should just keep going. So let me adjust my things even more. So I moved a couple of, you'll see once I get going. All right, I'm gonna try this one out. Starting the timer and finding my 2H pencil. Still going to put in my rule of thirds. I'm gonna focus on that in all three of these thumbnails. I think my bowl needs to be a lot larger. So rather than squish it into this little square, I'm gonna make the square fit the objects in a second, and square, I mean border. So this bowl is actually in front of the bottle, and it's actually much bigger in reality. Like when I'm looking at it here, I think it's a lot bigger, and it's going to extend below the initial frame I had. And the water bottle, I'm gonna make the water bottle bigger too. And this is just to show you, wow, as we draw, we can really change things. This, I'm doing some sighting now and measuring. So this jar hits the water bottle in the center of the water bottle, and it hits the bowl at about 1/3 of the way through the bowl. And again, the bottom, kind of in the middle of the bowl shape, not the middle of the top of the bowl, just the middle of the overall bowl shape is where the bottom of that can is. And then I have my makeup bottle overlapping, but it only comes up to half of this can, so I've already made it too high. And it kind of comes down here. Still on this angle. Here we go. Oh, apple. How my apple is balancing on the edge of this little jar, I don't know, but it's doing a good job. It's not in the center of the jar, and it's just hanging out there. Switching to my darker pencil to solidify some of these shapes. So when I'm looking at my still life here, the bowl it hits the ground below this makeup thing. So this is not correct. I'm going to bring my bowl down to where it actually is sitting in my line of sight. And I have 1 second left. You know what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take 1 more minute, watching my watch here. I'm gonna take 1 more minute. So I'm gonna take 4 minutes on this one because I want to make corrections. I wanna give myself time. Top of the bowl is meeting the top of this makeup thing. So look at how much bigger my bowl is than I was giving it credit for here. The side of it, and then the base is right here, and it's curved as well, very curved. And I can see inside the bowl. Ooh, finally got another detail in. There's the inside of the bowl. That excited me way too much. Folks, it's the simple things. It's the simple things. Here's my little wire stuff. All right, I got seconds left here. I didn't really worry about the shape of the bottle as much in this one. I was concerned with the shapes closer this time, and that's okay. It's good to try to focus on different things. But do you see how my composition extended beyond our border here? I don't really think that is a great composition if we cut it off, right? You're not showing the whole object, and for this purpose, I really kind of do want to. So I'm just going to redefine the edges, and I can make up the composition this way. So this is a different way of doing it, to draw first and then build your border around it. And I'm not going to end it here because that's almost a square, and as I said, we're not really dealing with square compositions yet. So I had to think of it as if you're on a computer, right? You can't just use this to stretch it and this to stretch it, you're going to use the corner and it's going to grow proportionately. So this proportion, this side to this side, is the same as this to this, only larger. I hope that made sense. I'm making sense in my head, and then it's not coming out quite as much. There's nothing really happening in these hot spots, and that's okay. Oops, there we go. Where are my hot spots here? Apparently I can't divide a rectangle into thirds. Green for go, pink for no. Okay, she's rhyming, watch out people. So things about this composition I'm enjoying are that there's a lot of variety. So I have different heights here. And I have them spaced sort of staggered instead of boop, boop, boop in a row, right? Now, nothing, as I said, nothing's happening in these hot spots, but there's action happening over here. And it's holding, it's sort of anchoring the composition on this side, but it's not random. It's not in the center and it's not too far off to the side. It's right around this third. And so I think this is actually a successful composition. Now, as I keep going, I think I could try this. I think it would be, before I change my setup, I'm going to do one of these vertically. Setting my timer, off it goes. Grabbing my pencil, 2H, here I go. All right, water bottle's still going in this third. Bowl shape. The more you draw them, the easier they become. I'm overlapping, so I'm drawing the thing that's behind it and you can see right through it, but that's okay. It's part of sighting, it's part of measuring as we draw, is to let things overlap just so that we can see, did we get this proportion right? So I'm going to draw all the objects all the way through as if they're see-through. So I have some overlap here. This is not touching this. I'm going to use my darker pencil to define that. There's a little gap between them, which is really, really appealing to me here. It's a pleasing negative space that's being created. I've done it again where I've made the bowl too small or I've made the makeup too big here. Yep, I need to make that bowl larger. I'm gonna try not erasing and see if I can just, sometimes that's a little difficult, but that's why I should have stayed a little bit lighter while I measured out all my shapes. Yeah, it's getting a bit messy. Moving back to the light pencil because I'm still blocking in all my shapes, and that way I don't have to erase. I can leave all my thinking lines. I want you to leave your thinking lines as you draw so that I can see the way you see. I can see how you're thinking. I only have 30 seconds left. Don't panic. Okay, panicking. Here's the bottle, and its top is like here. I'm focusing a little bit more on the outlines of things in this one, almost as if this one is really focusing on the negative space more than the rule of thirds. There's my timer. So this one, I'm gonna bring the sides down darker so you can see. This one looks like it's just touching here. That's a no-no for me. I really think that would be horribly not, it wouldn't feel right. It would be very displeasing. So I'm going to move my line out. So I'm adjusting my composition here. That is not cheating, that is planning. That's sensible planning. I might have just changed the dimensions a little bit and made it taller. And that's not a big deal. If I need to, I can cut a little bit off the bottom or a little bit off the top. And I think that it's still very pleasing. I enjoy the negative space. My bowl, see how wonky my bowl is? We'll sort that out later. The point is that the size is right, the placement's right in terms of where I want it to be. So even though the perspective of that bowl is terribly wrong, we're moving on. So things I was worried about, I'm gonna mark them just so you remember, was this, we don't want it touching the side here. What else? Wonky bowl, that's fine. I made sure that these were spaced. And if we are looking at rule of thirds, we've got the apple almost right here. Wow, it's more like here. Again, with the issue of dividing your piece up into, so it's okay to make marks here into thirds. This is my new thirds right here. People having trouble here. It's okay, it's okay. Let me just do this. Oh my goodness, that was a struggle. However, this is meant to show my thinking. It shows you exactly how I built it, what I changed, and where I'm going. I'm going to also change the top of this makeup thing because that is definitely not how tall it is. We're also going to do some open compositions versus closed compositions. So open means the objects go off the edge, and closed, they're all contained within the dimensions of the drawing. I'm going to try an open composition now in my next one. So maybe I'm going to put some notes here to help you. Rule of thirds definitely being applied. In here, it's scale and variety, no just touching. No just touching, and that's this issue right here where it was just touching the edge. So the rule of thirds was our first composition rule, and scale and varieties are third. And here it's also scale variety that I was focused on. And also, I mean, I wasn't really focused on it, but it ended up being part of it is foreground, middle ground, background. Most of this stuff is in the same area. Ground, it's not like a landscape, but there is a definite progression. They're not all in a row. Some things are much closer and some things are farther behind. So it's a little bit of that sort of layering, and maybe you could say foreground, middle ground, background on a small scale. I'm not going to write that down just in case I change my mind about it. This one, again, rule of thirds. What else was I worried about? I was worried about no just touching, so that was rule 3. Positive negative space balance, that was big here. That was a big change rather than negative space being a big circle around here. So I'm going to say minus, this was like not a great thing. Negative positive space wasn't great in this one. Okay, it was just this big circle. Whereas this one had much more interesting negative space. I'm running out of space to write that, so maybe I'll just add it down here. A plus. A plus, I'm gonna put it in green. Negative and positive space. Better. Check mark. Okay, moving on. Oh, I get to change my things. Stop calling them things. Let's see. Water bottle in the foreground is going to look very, very strange just because it's such a big object out of the things that I have. But I'm going to move it to the right side. All right, I have no idea if this is gonna work. I've got some things stacked again. Let's put them all on the ground. That might be a bit awkward. Yeah, I think this is going to be awkward right off the bat, but I want to show you what I'm seeing, show you how I'm thinking. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw it, and then we'll fix it. So first we're going to draw how awkward it is. Yay. Here's my, okay, I've got a water bottle up here. It's the tallest thing, so I'm going to start with that so I don't run out of space. I said I was going to try to practice open composition. I'm not sure if I'm going to achieve that right off the bat with this one, but my bowl is growing. That way I can let it go right off the edge of the page, thus creating an open composition, but I do not want it to go off the bottom of my page. When I talk and draw, I get a lot less done. Time just flies. My apple is larger because it's in the foreground. There are a lot of mistakes in this one. I can already... Oh, you just gotta laugh at yourself. Please don't beat yourself up about drawing, ever. It's a thinking process. It's new. You don't really do this a lot in life, this analytical seeing, thinking about things spatially. We do it unconsciously. So do not beat yourself up when things are awkward, as is happening with me right now. I'm just laughing at myself. Okay, I'm switching to my darker pencil. I'm not drawing the part of the bowl that's off of the side. It really wouldn't be a great composition to have it cut off there, but let's try it. Let's try cutting that water bottle off. I might regret it. The good thing is we're in the planning stage, so we can change anything. 22 seconds, 22 seconds. Go, 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 go. Don't panic. Okay. So I'm going to, so if I cut it off there, it would be really strange if this bowl would just be touching. I could cut it off there though, and cut off the bottom of the apple. It doesn't look too crazy because the top is cut off too. It's not an amazing composition, but one of the issues I was having with this is when I put the items down, to me, they appeared to be just like 4 very awkward objects, all the same height-ish. And I didn't like it. I'm gonna erase the outside here just so I can get the full effect and see what it really does look like without the top and the bottom. It's not hideous, but it's hard conceptually. It's hard to understand what you're seeing, right? If your things are cut off. This is just a tube of some kind. If you don't see the top of the water bottle, it's hard to know exactly what it is. In terms of rule of thirds, we're not dying here. We've got a couple of good placements like this water bottle and almost this object. I'm gonna talk less, draw more. Oop, throwing things. I'm going to try this one again because I don't think I spaced the objects well at all. So I'm gonna do this one a bit differently. Instead of object by object, I'm gonna try to build them all at the same time. 3 minutes on the clock. 2H pencil. Okay. So if this is the top of the water bottle, and I'm going to include it this time, it comes down. Here I'm thinking about if all the objects were in a bag together. It's such a strange thing to ask people to do. Imagine that these objects were wrapped in a bag. So this makeup comes way down here, and that's where the apple is, the edge of the apple. And then it comes up here to the edge of the bowl, comes around the bowl. If it was just going right back up to the water bottle, it would look like that. But if it were coming around the bowl here to the water bottle, interesting, right? Such a strange concept, but you can see what I was doing. I'm trying to encompass everything. Let's see if this helped me a bit more with my objects. Water bottle, I'm measuring here, I'm sighting. The water bottle cuts into this much of the bowl. And already I've discovered my water bottle is like tiny. The scale is off. It's not a huge deal, but it's more like that tall. Okay, coming down here, all the way down to here. This is where our canister is. And the apple cuts that off. The apple does not touch this object, but the apple does cut off the bottom corner of that canister. And I'm looking, and the apple actually does not go past midway through the bottle, so I kind of had that wrong. It was coming all the way out over here. So through my measurement, my sighting, I am changing the placement of the apple. And then looking at negative space here, canister comes all the way up to here before the edge of the makeup comes down, and the makeup comes down halfway through the apple. So I'm going to cut the apple in half. That's exactly how far down it comes. And the top of the makeup bottle is kind of in line with here. That's not the top of the lid, it's just the top of the bottle itself. And then the lid, woo! That was 3 minutes, so I'm gonna give myself one more. The lid is kind of in the middle of this top of this canister. So here's the top of the canister, cutting that in half, and that's how high my lid goes. When we do sighting like this and measurements of everything as a whole and compare them together to get the right proportions, it's called, or it can be called, organizational line drawing, which is one of my favorite types of drawing. In this type of drawing, you don't actually erase all your measurement lines, you leave them all there to be visible, which is so cool. Now, this is not a good thumbnail because I have not defined the outer limits of my paper, so I have not really planned out that composition very well. How about I make this into a vertical composition this time? I'm going to include, I'm going to fix the top of the bottle here. Here we go. Okay, darker pencil here so that you can see some of my corrections. Okay, the bottle shape is not as precious or as important right now as the other stuff, but I want to include the top of that. So I'm going to make this a vertical composition, and I'm including the top of the water bottle. I am not going to include the whole bowl. It is getting evicted. Half of it is. So let's erase what's not showing up anymore. And let's do our little trick here with our paper. I could cut the composition, like cut that makeup bottle completely out, which is interesting, having 3 objects down below, or include a bit of it. I know that's a bit strange, but yeah, because it's so narrow, it's really hard to bring the page down right through it. It just gives the appearance of being cut off or like just touching, which we don't want. So to make this, I brought this down, this line at the bottom way down, because I'm trying to keep my rectangle as close to the same proportions. All right, and I've cut into this one, doesn't matter. Let's keep going. I'm going to move my objects around again. This will be interesting and possibly a fail, purposeful fail, one that we can maybe learn from. Starting my timer. I'm giving myself a bit more space with these thumbnails. They're kind of growing, which is okay. Just don't let them become huge. They're supposed to be small studies. The larger you make them, the harder it is going to be to fit them, switching to my lighter pencil, the harder it's going to be to fit them into 3 minutes, right? You're just going to end up needing more and more time per each study, and it's going to be exhausting. We don't want to drain you to bits with this. This isn't even the main drawing. This is just the planning. But honestly, I find the planning to be one of the most draining things because of the concentration it takes. Okay, the cylinder that this bowl is sitting on is smaller than it. Like around, the bowl is wider. Words are hard. Ooh, okay, running into problems already with my measuring. This is the bottom of the makeup container. It's just too tall. I'm just making it too large. Let's make it shorter. And the apple is not touching anything. It's over here. You notice the top of my apples, the little pit sits in here. It's not at the very top. Random observation that might help you drawing spherical things. The bowl is crossing over top of my water bottle. Okay, bringing in the darker pencil here. And all these round things are just basically a series of ovals, right? Thank you, timer. All right, so what do we have here? We've got an open or closed composition. With this cut off, should we cut off the top of the bottle? I don't want to. We're gonna have to though, because I don't want to cut off I think it's harder to cut off what's below. All right, and so we're gonna keep the bottom here. We don't need this anymore. Not a particularly successful composition, right? That's not the point though. The point is we're trying new things. We are trying a variety. So for this one, I think we did an open composition well. And for this one, so this one's open composition because of where we cut off the bowl. And this one is also an open composition, but I think it's a bit strange, right? There's all this negative space here. And so I'm gonna put that in pink, is that our open composition is awkward. As I said, you don't need to make notes, but for yourself, if you want to remember why you think it's strange or think on the page, for sure leave those notes. I think this is why it's awkward here. And then I think that I'm switching to green again. Green is good. This is fine the way it's cut off here, but that is awkward. And the negative space is, it's not bad. There's some small bits over here balanced with the big chunk over there, but yeah, so I think negative space is not bad. On this one, you could argue it's a bit strange, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the variety more than the negative space that's all the way around your objects over here in this first one. I think our very first composition was probably the poorest, and they just got more interesting from there. But you can see the process here and the goal is to learn to move objects in space, and you know, they don't have to look great right now. We are just trying to figure out how to place them within the rectangle. So if you just do random blobs, it's not going to be as helpful to you. So you do want to try to draw those shapes as best as you can, or at least, you know, the outline of the forms so you can see the size differences and stuff. If you just scribble in some blobs, where's my light pencil here? I will show you how this is not as effective. So if you're rushing. So here's my water bottle, and here's my bowl, and here's my can is right here. Everything's just a circle apparently. Here's my makeup, and here's my apple. I mean, it's not horrible, it's useful still. It really takes you out of overthinking things, right? I might have led you slightly astray by the fact that I was kind of caring about the itty bitty shapes within here. That's not really the focus, but it is important to get a bit more specific than just these blobs. And I'll show you just about how specific we need it to be. So we need to know that this isn't just a circle, because shapes do matter. And if we had a composition with 3 circular objects, say like that, you know, we might conclude that this is boring or strange or repetitive. But if we make sure to show that this is a cylinder, and then this is a not a sphere, but it's a spherical in the bowl shape, and this is another cylinder, and this is a box shape. So as best as you can, you're making that box. And this is a sphere, the apple's a sphere. That is as much detail as you need. And let's say you're not good with perspective yet, and your little makeup box looks like this. Fine, that's okay. It still is enough of a shape that you can see, is this a good composition with all of these things landing at exactly the same sort of height on your page? Not so much, right? That's not great variety. Okay, so scale and varieties, boo, variety. And layering things through space. So overlap. I'm gonna put a little X. So that we did not do so well. I mean, overlap maybe a little bit with the back object because this is coming in front of it. So that's good. I don't know why I drew it in red or pink. That's not bad. That's good overlap right there. But it's right here that we're having problems, right? Oop, throwing things. We're having problems right here because these 3 things are online with each other, and they're also equally spaced apart. So that's the opposite of variety, right? But you can see how much thinking goes into these little shapes. It really works. You can still decide that your page is going to come over here. You're going to include the top of that water bottle shape, come down here, and maybe right there. You wouldn't want all those objects to be on the very bottom edge, touching the edge of your page, right? Touching the edge of your page is just as bad as things touching each other, actually maybe worse. So if you have something that's right close to touching, it is better to cut it off or include the whole thing. So even though these things are along the same line, I have not sat them on the very bottom of my page. So I get 1 little bonus point for that. Yay. So you don't have to draw these objects really well in order to understand how to place them on your page. Awesome, awesome. I hope that helps. I hope you enjoyed it. I love making thumbnails. My sketchbooks are full of them. And I hope you do too. There's always a special place in my heart for thumbnails. I hope that makes sense. You can always leave me a comment if you have further questions.